now we have that guidance. We have that operational ability to say nope. And it talks about like monitoring for condensation hourly. And, if you have a building automation system, great. If you don't, how are you telling that humidity is within range or not? So there's a lot of operational guidance.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal: to help you fight dirty, every instrument, every time. Whether you're tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go beyond clean.
All right, Clean Freaks, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond Clean podcast. You're listening to Season 30, Tray Command. I'm your host, Bobby Parker. And joining me again in studio for the last time for this season is our guest co-host for Season 30, Angela Benson. Welcome to the studio, Angela.
Thank you, Bobby. I hopefully will still be able to pop in here and there on future episodes as a guest maybe, or maybe we'll do this co-host thing again.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for sure, and we'll get more opportunities to talk with you. It is a little sad to be closing out Season 30. We are looking forward to our next season on steam sterilization in 2026. But before we get there, we've got some breaking news. I hope you brought your anchor voice with you today, Angela, because we're talking about the release of a new guidance document that I'm not sure was on your radar. It certainly wasn't on mine. And it has to do with temperature and humidity, the ASHRAE 43 document.
How exciting for an educator, a new document to read through and to try to understand and interpret, and then also get your team on board with it as well. Never ending learning opportunities for this job.
Well, what's funny about this one, I feel like a lot of the times you're right. It's like, okay, we have this new document, ST-108 is one of those that comes to mind, this water quality document that has some pretty, frankly burdensome monitoring requirements in it. And it's both good news, like, hey, we're getting some leverage to get the water quality we need, but also it's sometimes interpreted from, SPD's perspective as bad news of, hey, we have to do all of this monitoring to keep our water quality in check. And honestly, it is all good news because it's for the sake of the patient, right? But I'm just saying, the spirit of winning people over. I feel like this document, this ASHRAE 43 document, is mostly good news. It is an operational guidance for how to manage temperature and humidity in the sterile storage area, or at least that's what Google tells me. So we're bringing in an infection preventionist expert who's both read through this document and has also implemented it in his system of facilities for managing sterile storage. So wrapping up our season around tray logistics, I want to make sure that we talk about this environmental conditions piece of it, and what better way than to work through this brand new document, ASHRAE 43. We will be right back with our infection preventionist expert, Steven Rusbarsky, after this short break.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
And joining us now in studio is Steven Rusbarsky, Senior Infection Preventionist at a large healthcare system out in the Midwest. Steven, thanks for joining us on the show today. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Bobby. Glad to be here. This is always a pleasure to just kind of sign in and talk some HLD, SPD, and all the above, whatever we get ourselves into.
Yeah, it's our favorite time of the week, of course. And we always love the opportunity to talk with folks adjacent to the sterile processing industry, particularly infection preventionists, as you get to dig more into the standards and some of the areas of the hospital that we don't see and touch very often. Stephen, before we dive into sterile processing and kind of the topic of the show, I always like to give people an opportunity to share a little bit of their background. Would you mind introducing yourself for us and telling us a little bit about what you've been doing in your career?
Of course. So I have worked in infection control for over 10 years, almost 11 years this winter. And I consider SPD and HLD folks to be some of my best friends. Definitely, there's a lot of infection control opportunities, as we all know. So part of what I do relevant to this conversation is interface with HLD, SPD leaders across all of the hospitals that I support, over 20 hospitals and some outpatient areas in 4 states. And, it could be one year, it could be, hey, how are we doing with some of the ANSI-AMI standards? What gaps do we have? And so we kind of identify gaps and make things better. Or it could be, we've noticed that we do tracers with Joint Commission resources. And hey, we've noticed that 9 out of our 20 hospitals have these 2 things at the top that need to be worked on. So what are the downfalls and what can we do to make things better? Is there any commonalities? So I sit on sterile processing steering committees, sit on HLD, SPD work groups, and just in a constant state of readiness and constant state of improving quality.
That's the model that we're often preaching about over here, is that, that crucial partnership between sterile processing and infection prevention. And so thank you for that advocacy and being that for your 20 hospital SPDs out there that really need that partnership, oversight, help, gap surveys, and digging into standards. So yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And it's part of why we want to talk with you, Stephen. So in previous conversations we've had with you on Beyond Clean through some of our conferences, we've talked some about tray logistics. And that's the topic for the season. This season is moving sterile trays around, whether it's, where you store them at point of use, how you get them through the sterilizer. And we've got you lined up here for the last episode of the season, and wanted to talk with you from an infection preventionist standpoint, how that sterile storage room ought to be monitored and kept. And so as we started talking about that, Stephen, you were the first to introduce me to an update to the standards. We've titled the episode ASHRAE 43 and Sterile Processing. I think it was a missed opportunity. It should be ASHRAE 43 and me, right?
So you can make it rhyme. We're on the right track. Yes, right.
That's right. So when you told me about this standard, I did a little bit of Googling, but there's still a lot of gaps that could be filled in. So why don't you start us off here at the top of the conversation with just some definitions? Tell us, what is this ASHRAE 43 document, and why should SPD care about it?
Sure. So I guess first off, let's just start by defining what ASHRAE is. And for those of you who may not know exactly, it stands for American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. So it's a really big, long title. I'm glad they make it just say ASHRAE because it's a lot easier. But you can kind of get the sense that these are people who create healthcare standards for all the cold air, all the humidity, all the warm air. Obviously very important. It's a society that you can join, and if obviously in your facility you have plant operations people or facilities people, they most likely already have a subscription to ASHRAE. And so therefore they can most likely already access ASHRAE 43. So, you asked about, what the standard is and why it matters. So think about sterile processing. That means sterile storage. And, we've all heard, you got to keep your temperatures between 62 and 75, or you got to keep your humidity between 30 and 60. But, what happens if your temps dip below for a minute, for 10 minutes or an hour all day? What if it's only 1 degree? Or what if your humidity spikes up for a second and then goes back? We don't have clear-cut answers until now. So ASHRAE 43 injects some common sense into these situations. So now we have really just practical answers.
I feel like that question is the one that's always been missing from the documents, and I've always been frustrated by it. I remember prior to, was it 2017 when ST79 was updated? It used to be there were temperature and humidity recommendations directly in the AAMI ST79 document. I remember in particular the decontamination recommendations were brutal cold. It recommended 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and every facilities manager out there was cussing AAMI all the time for that because nobody could meet it. It was so cold. And that also had an interesting play in the temperature and humidity requirements. And so they, and I think it was 2017, punted the ball and said, you know what, let's let the FGI standards and ASHRAE dictate the recommended temp and humidity for the sterile processing space. And so there's a little bit more nuance now to it than it used to be with that ASHRAE 170 document based on when your facility was built and then some updated temperature and humidity requirements. But to your point, even in that document, there still wasn't a lot of really helpful guidance for what to do in the case of a deviation. There's just a recommendation of keep it in this range. And so I personally have felt a bit lost trying to navigate what to do if it's been maybe 1 hour out of range. And infection prevention's looking at me and saying, hey, you're the sterile processing, sterile storage expert. How big of a risk is this? And I don't know where we turn in that situation. So that's encouraging and helpful to hear about.
So to your point, and actually the answer lies in the question that you asked, because you talked about ASHRAE 170, you talked about some of those older standards, FGI guidelines. So you even mentioned those are design requirements. So if you're building something from scratch, you got a new SPD or a new outpatient center going up, that's how you have to build it. Yes. Or if you're doing a big renovation and tearing down walls and putting new stuff in, same thing. Those are design requirements. So now we have, you said, because you're saying, well, I don't really know what to do, what to tell them. So what that is operational. So now we have ASHRAE 43 with operational guidance. So now we can differentiate design requirements from operational guidance. What are we doing day to day? What happens if this happens? How do we react? So this new ASHRAE 43 bridges the gap between design parameters and real situations. So just real life, we have that now. I can tell you, though, it requires the implementation of a ventilation management program. Basically, to translate, that just means, you're going to have to get people together and figure out what you have and put some things in place, put some things on paper, get a manual put together. But once you go through that work, you've got something that's operational.
With the ventilation program you just suggested and working with other departments in the hospital area, how do you see the new guidelines impacting the day-to-day management and also a little bit more of what exactly is in the document? Myself, being in sterile processing, a lot of these, acronyms and terms and other departments are kind of not even on our radar right away or our thought pattern. How can you, help us really get involved in this?
Sure. So once you actually get the ASHRAE 43 document and look it over, it's pretty cool because it goes step by step. It has guidance. So like if your humidity is this far out of range, it'll say, here's what you do for if it's this far out of range for, 1 hour or 8 hours. If it's even further out of range, here's what you do. And actually from that guidance, I have been able to create an algorithm for people, just something really easy to follow. Because really, think about it. And I know we've all been here. You as an SPD manager or you as an infection preventionist, whoever's listening to this right now, get a call. It's Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Or even better, it's Sunday night and the air handler is shut down. And humidity may or may not have spiked. We don't really know. Can we perform surgeries on Monday morning? You've got about 10 hours to answer this question. And you're having dinner on Sunday night. It's like, okay, Those are the questions that we have probably all faced. And if not, then you might have only been working for a couple of years in your job because it happens. So yeah, now we have that guidance. We have that operational ability to say, nope, and it talks about like monitoring for condensation hourly. And, if you have a building automation system, great. If you don't, how are you telling that humidity is within range or not? So there's a lot of operational guidance.
Yeah, that monitoring question is another important one that I want to get to. But before we do, I feel like we're answering a question that I've had a question mark in the back of my mind for the last decade here about this, operational guidance for variances. And it'd be a shame if we moved on and didn't answer with any more specificity. Would you mind giving us just a couple of examples of what some of those recommendations look like? Or, what is the algorithm or the heuristic for deciding like what's okay, what requires reprocessing according to this guidance? Can you give us some of the numbers on the show here?
Sure. So it talks about sterile storage, maximum 60% humidity. So in my algorithm, I have literally I put that as the top rectangle. And then moving down, there's a decision point. Is your relative humidity 60% or is it greater than 60%? If it's less than or equal to 60, boom, no action needed. You're good. That's typical operational. If it's not though, then I've got the next thing is like a triangle. So it's a rectangle. And it just says, okay, tell your facilities people that they need to take a corrective action. And also, you should have a team of professionals. And that's actually outlined in ASHRAE 43. You have a team of people who are ready to respond. Those people need to be alerted at that time. They may not take any action at that time, but they're alerted. If your facilities people can mitigate that humidity that is too high, great, then no action needed. But this is where they kind of give you the time. So if it's above 60% for 24 hours or above 70% for 8 hours, then we're looking for condensation hourly. We're doing a visual inspection of sterile items. Peel packs are starting to unpeel themselves. That'd be kind of an extreme example, but we're looking for that. We're looking for, just anything that's out of the ordinary, especially condensation, moisture. And then after 24 hours, you're probably reprocessing things at that point. So that's just a little kind of a sneak peek into some of the guidance that they have in that document.
Yeah, it's really helpful to have some concrete time frames. I'm thinking about this response team. We're recording this only a couple weeks here before Halloween and just went to the zoo Halloween walkthrough and saw somebody dressed as Captain Planet while we were there. And so I have this I'm the humidity guy and the earth guy, and I don't know who the fire guy would be. Forgive this analogy; it's not working. but
it's more the Fantastic Four. We've got the earth guy and the fire guy and all that. Yes,
that's right. So yeah. So where I'm leading with this ridiculous question is who should be on that management team? Like what are some of the activities that they're doing? Like I could see infection prevention and facilities and sterile processing being on there and having this operational guidance in front of them. But is there anybody else that I'm missing or that ought to be a part of that?
I mean, I think if I were going to list 4, you've already listed 3, infection preventionist, your leader of that area, whether it's surgery or sterile processing, some leader. And if I were going to say a couple others, it would be probably your environmental safety people. And then if there was going to be big time decisions like, hey, there's a flood next door and that's why humidity's high, or just, you probably would have to let your VP of operations or chief operations officer, somebody who can say, okay, well, call in these people. I can write these checks to these third-party contractors to clean all this up, or whatever the case is. But if you're throwing away high dollar things or you're having to fix high dollar things, then obviously you'd want to let your C-suite know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's always a hard decision of, it's one thing we think about from sterile processing's perspective of opening and re-sterilizing things. I think everybody in SPD has had one of those work nightmares where like the sprinkler system goes off and everything in sterile storage is ruined and you have to reprocess them all. But to your point, there's also question marks of like, what if it's the implant room that went out of range and now we have, millions of dollars of implants that we have to decide whether or not they can be opened, and they were shipped sterile and we can't re-sterilize them if we open them. And yeah, there's always that piece to wonder about or think about. So yeah, having some C-suite level involvement or support makes a lot of sense.
Well, I just want to pivot really quick too about, our very favorite subject of Joint Commission coming through and doing surveys. And I'm just curious, with the AAMI guidelines changing so much without those ranges being published anymore, do you expect those accreditation bodies referencing ASHRAE 43 during surveys in the future?
That's a great question. So I think it's even in ASHRAE. These are guidelines of an advisory nature. So they're not mandatory until you say that you're going to follow them. So if, you have a surveyor in your facility and you say, yeah, we follow ASHRAE 43. At that point, they become mandatory because you've said that you follow them. You might have elements of that in your policies. And so if you adopt them, then you need to follow them. But otherwise, if you don't follow them and you don't say that you do, they're not mandatory. That being said, there is no other operational advice, at least that I know of, or that ASHRAE knows of. So you want to make sure that you're following some kind of operational advice or that you have an answer for why you're doing what you're doing and why you've maybe created your own operational guidelines or rules that you're following. Because now that this exists, I could even see a surveyor say it's not appropriate to use design standards to answer operational questions.
And I found that several surveyors also don't really even know some of these guidelines out there, or, like I said, myself isn't super familiar with this. I found that when we've had surveyors come through, even in the last few years, they're still talking temp and humidity. And like you said, though, as long as you have an answer for what you look to, your facilities department, knowing who to ask and having them also aware of what we're looking for in sterile processing, because sometimes when things happen, they're not really, I don't know, I've found that certain individuals are not aware of the biggest impact in sterile processing just because they're thinking generators and kind of, the behind the scenes in that kind of world versus, surgical.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The ventilation management program, if you go through this process and you develop that program, you're going to have everything outlined and you'll be able to answer those hard questions that they might be asking. So what I would say as far as, should you adopt this or not? Like I kind of alluded to before, have an answer either way. And you might need to create a risk assessment, build a business case. You can go back and listen to this podcast again, listen to the questions that were answered, and just develop some answers of your own to these questions. Talk with your facilities leaders, get some pros and cons on paper of what, okay, we're going to start this up. What's it going to cost? Well, an ASHRAE subscription, maybe. Probably not any more FTEs. Other costs, you're going to need to be training people. You're going to need to sit down and spend some time. So there's that cost. What are the pros? You're going to have something on the table, a book on the table you can slide over to the survey people when they come by that says, here's exactly what we do. So you got to go through that process either way. But definitely if you decide not to adopt this, have some sort of rational response ready as to why you've decided to not adopt operational guidelines.
The trouble is to what we've already talked about and what you alluded to, Stephen, is I'm not aware of a lot of research and guidance out there about how to make this operational decision wisely. And so at least reading through the document and seeing what the recommendations are to have something to compare against I would think would be valuable. Unless your infection prevention team has pulled together a wide amount of research related to temp and humidity and sterile supplies, and you've already kind of made your own algorithm and decision tree, I would think at least having the document and reading through it and making a decision based on what those recommendations are and putting that in policy would be a wise course of action. I'm curious. I would love to look at the bibliography and the research associated with this advisory document, because I've been there, and it is a difficult situation when you've got hours to make a really large decision about what we're going to do with our sterile inventory. At the top of the show, Stephen, you opened by saying if you haven't encountered this issue of a temp and humidity variance in sterile processing yet, you probably haven't been in the industry very long. Well, you get your experience multiplied by at least 20 because of how many facilities that you relate with. I wanted to give you an opportunity here at the close of the show. Have you had to walk through any of these difficult sterility questions related to temp and humidity? And you want to tell us about kind of how that went and how you resolved it?
Sure. And that kind of goes back into what you were saying as far as, if IPs have created something already and all that. So yes, I mean, there have been instances where we, at one facility, it was just, okay, well, it went out of balance for a little bit, and, we monitored temp, humidity, condensation for an hour or two, and then it's back on, and there's no big deal. And then there was one where, like you said, the sprinklers, actually it wasn't the sprinklers, it was just a really extreme fluctuation such that there was condensation everywhere. And it was an insurance claim. They had to throw that much away. So it really, there's a lot of variance there. So through all these experiences, and this is important especially for any of your audience members listening who have developed something, that I would encourage you to take a look at what has actually come out, because if you've developed something and you're saying throw this stuff away or don't throw this stuff away, there's risk with saying throw things away. There's risk with saying don't throw things away. And if people are going to push back with what you developed, they're pushing back on you. Whereas if you use this ASHRAE 43, well, now they're pushing back on ASHRAE, because you're saying, hey, these are operational guidance. We created this specifically because this new operational stuff came out. So I would encourage them, just, if I were to say next step, get with your facilities people, get a copy of this ASHRAE, and just take a look at it and compare it to what you've already created, because you might find that you could even loosen up a little bit. Maybe, you can change your temperatures a little bit. Definitely encourage that.
Yeah, well, thank you for laying all that out for us. I get excited about this kind of stuff, which is probably Angela. That's probably how we ended up doing what we do for a living. It's exciting, not because temp and humidity is all that exciting personally, but whenever we have something new like this in the industry that could really change the game, I really feel like this episode, Stephen, is going to help some sterile processing departments out there listening in who otherwise wouldn't have a path forward to make wise decisions about temp and humidity when there is a variance. And so, really thankful that you came on the show today to not only make us aware of the publishing of this, I think it was back in July of this year, but also give us some practical guidance about how to implement that. So really interesting and fantastic episode. Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here and go make things better.
And That was Steven Rusbarsky, infection preventionist in the Midwest for a large health system. And Angela, that conversation that we had today about the difference between design requirements and operational guidance, I think is really helpful. What Steven said about it's not a good idea to try to make operational decisions from a design requirement is the lived experience of everybody trying to answer these HVAC questions. I mean, what do you do when this happens? And all we have in the guidance in front of us is just shoulds. You should design it this way. And then you're looking at that document and say, well, that's great, but my space wasn't designed to be able to do that. You know, you're talking to your facilities team with this temp and humidity thing, and they say, I'm sorry, short of putting in a $2 million air handler, we physically cannot make that happen. I don't know if that's been your experience, but in just about every really ancient facility I've worked in, we've had some of those struggles.
You know, but it also can be in a brand new facility. We just had a brand new facility built for us, and that's making me think about when I first visited in the SPD area, it was so hot in the assembly area. There was just two really smaller areas, and it was just crazy out of range. And even the way it was designed, I believe, to begin with, they hadn't even thought about the separation from dirty to clean and making sure the positive, negative. And so those barriers are still there, even in this time, which is kind of mind-blowing with all of these resources out there. I think it's really just important to get the right people on those advisory teams and to be involved with it, because yes, you can easily say, oh, this is old and, you know, there's not much we can do about it. But even when it's new, there's sometimes those big questions missed.
For sure. I think that Steven's exhortation to us all at the end of, you know, getting our hands on an ASHRAE 43 document and giving it a read through to see what's there is wise. You may reach out to your infection prevention team or your risk or accreditation teams to see if they've already done so, because you may already have that membership or that document in the house somewhere. But this is one of those conversations, to Steven's point, that you want to have thought about before that Sunday 5 p.m. dinner when you get the call about the air handlers. You know, have that algorithm already in place so that you're not scrambling at the last minute. And I'm just thankful that we have that resource available to us today. Angela, if you can believe it or not, we have just wrapped up episode 8 of our season 30. It has been a tremendous pleasure having your insights and help as co-host on the season. I'm really grateful you joined us this season.
I'm very excited to have joined. I appreciate being able to broadcast some of my rambles. If any of my coworkers listen into this, they will know that that's definitely my personality. And I've really enjoyed working with you, Bobby.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it for season 30. We'll take a little break in between seasons, as we often do, play you some of the good reruns from the old days, and we'll be back at the start of the year with season 31. Excited for what's to come in 2026. Until we talk to you again next time, we'll leave you as we always do here at Beyond Clean. Keep fighting dirty.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Beyond Clean. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to Beyond Clean on your favorite podcast app, or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for Beyond Clean in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. We look forward to hearing from you.